Now on Overnights,
I believe in reason and common sense.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business with the Treasury of Common Sense.
We spoke to Leith
never goes out of style.
last week about immigration, and since then it seems we've been talking about immigration on the program virtually every day because it's having such an effect on our economy, on the housing market. Well, Albo's economic management skills, along with immigration, are being questioned even more now. He's currently in the air, but Leith has published some interesting stats on the website, Macro Business, and he joins us on the program. G'day, Leith.
G'day, Quinn. Thanks for having me on again.
Mate, you really touched a nerve with what we spoke about last week, and particularly with the issue of university students feeding into the housing crisis. And I'll ask you about some thoughts about that in a moment. But just firstly, Albo's currently in the skies. He's heading to the US for the APEC summit. But some statistics that you've published on Macro Business showing that we've got plunging living standards. Despite wages going up yesterday, we do have plunging living standards in this country.
Mate, we do. Unfortunately, in the last week, we've actually had three pieces of data come through. Independent data has come through, and it's actually showing that Australia is sort of suffering a world record living standards decline. So the first bit of information that came out was about a week ago by a gentleman named Michael Reid from the AFR, who basically, accessed some OECD data, and it showed that Australian households have suffered the largest income decline after inflation per capita last financial year. So effectively, Australian households per capita went backwards by 5.1% last financial year, and that was the biggest income loss basically in the world, according to this data. And literally the very next day, Bloomberg also reported a survey which showed that Australia has the lowest rental availability. So our rental vacancy rate's 0.9%. And that, according to Bloomberg, was the lowest out of all the countries surveyed in that report. And then just on Monday this week, The Economist, which is like a major international economics magazine that's been around for decades, ranked Australia as having ranked Australia as number one in the world for having increased inflation. So effectively, the way they work that out is they look at the actual inflation, and they also look at inflation expectations, and Australia ranked worst on that as well. So effectively, we've had three surveys, with a period of days of each other, which show that Australia's basically, got the worst outcomes.
What do you think is driving that? Is that the housing cost issue? Is it inflation?
Yeah, look, it's a combination of things. Australia's wage growth has been weaker before inflation than most other countries, and of course our inflation's quite high as well. And so effectively, when you put those two things together, we've suffered a massive income loss. And it's also exacerbated too because Australia has the highest share of variable rate mortgages in the world. So most housing markets in the world are mostly fixed rate with a bit of variable. Ours is the other way around. We're mostly variable with a bit of fixed rate. So effectively what that means is the Reserve Bank of Australia has now increased rates by 4.25% since May last year. And what that means is that's fallen on households with mortgages a lot quicker here than most other countries in the world because we've got variable rates predominantly.
You then look at Sorry, go on.
Oh, yeah. So, and at the same time, we've obviously got this, this massive rental inflation as well. So our rents are rising at a very high rate compared to most countries in the world as well. And that gets back to, obviously, this extreme sort of immigration-led population growth that we're experiencing. So all these factors combining to basically, shrink our household disposable income more than most other places in the world.
Yeah, you look at the figures for rental availability, vacancy rates and so forth, we're less than 1%. In the United States, above 6%. So that all feeds into how hard it is to find a place to rent and the cost of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In that survey from Bloomberg, it shows that the two worst nations are Australia and Canada. We're the worst, Canada's second worst. And we're also the two countries that are having the highest, immigration at the moment. So, Canada is even worse than us on the immigration front. So their immigration went up by about 1.2 million people last financial year. Now, that's in a country of about 40 million people. So Canada's gone even stronger than us on immigration, and it's causing similar sorts of housing problems over there. And also their economy is also suffering a per capita recession like us. So their economy, like us, is growing, but it's not growing fast enough to keep pace with the population, which means that everyone's slice of the economic pie is shrinking. So, it is a sort of Anglo disease, and New Zealand's probably going to join the party because their immigration's also ramped up to a record level as well. So they'll no doubt follow behind us as well.
We spoke about this with you last week on the program. I think we've now touched on it on the show every day since. It really struck a nerve with our listeners. I spoke to Mark Speakman, the New South Wales opposition leader, on this show on Monday, and he seems to be one of the few politicians who is now speaking about slowing down immigration. I don't know whether politicians are scared off by Pauline Hanson, what happened years ago, that she's obviously been branded racist many, many years ago because she wanted immigration slowed, whether politicians just don't want to go there now because they don't want to be attracting that. Yeah,
well, I mean, it's interesting you say that, Clinton, because in September, I remember I was on this show with Luke Ryan, and I ripped into Mark Speakman because back then he basically said we needed more immigration to protect the continent, basically this sort of populate or perish argument. And I remember at the time he got absolutely ripped apart on 2GB, in the Daily Telegraph and Sky and a whole bunch of places. And then he's obviously learnt the lesson from that, and now he's recognised that New South Wales, Sydney, as well as Melbourne, other places in Australia, got this intractable housing crisis at the moment, and you simply cannot fix it when you grow the population like a science experiment. And to his credit, he's recognised that he erred. He went the wrong way on that, and he's changed his position, which is, basically when information changes, you should change your position. So good on him. But we're also seeing other politicians or ex-politicians coming out as well. Like Peter Costello has been a big migration guy forever. He's actually chairman of Nine and the SMH and the Age have been behind big migration for a long time. And he actually came out early in the week as well, saying we need to basically cut immigration to because housing and infrastructure isn't keeping up. So good on him. And then also the boss of the ANZ Bank also mentioned the same problems. And so did Chris Richardson, the former chief economist of I think it's Deloitte Access Economics, came out and said we need to slow immigration because the housing infrastructure can't keep up. So the positive thing about this is it is becoming more spoken of now. It's not just fringe guys like me who are beating the drum. It's also politicians and people that were formerly for big Australian immigration are now saying, no, this has gone too far. We need to wind this back. So the public sentiment is shifting. We just need the government to shift as well.
Well, we need decision makers to join that thought. What do you think the chances of Anthony Albanese changing his position, given his background?
Yeah, that's right. Well, he's a very big Australia guy, and it's going to be hard for him to change because he's literally just signed recently, several months ago, migration deals with India to basically open the borders up to India. So it's going to be very hard to sort of go back on those sorts of things. So look, I believe when I see it, but he hasn't shown much. Pretty much everything that's come out of Labor so far has been, gaslighting and pretending that there's not a problem, or pretending that they're fixing it through their, through their wet lettuce Housing Australia Future Fund, which basically wants to add 30,000 homes over, public housing over 5 years, which is 6,000 a year, which would basically get chewed up in 2 weeks of immigration per year. So, all these sorts of window dressing ideas, trying to say it's a supply issue when it's really a demand issue, all those sorts of things. So they really need to steer into the problem rather than just try and sort of obfuscate and try and cover it up, which is kind of where they're at the moment. Hopefully the political pressure will then force them to act sooner or later.
Well, if he ever comes home, we might be able to deal with it.
Yeah, good old Airbus Albo.
He's in the air right as we speak. Good to talk to you, Lee. Thank you, mate.
Yeah, no problem anytime.
Lee